Today we're going to talk about scales and arpeggios, which used to be a source of dread for me personally. I don't know about you guys, but I have learned to love them because they are really one of the most effective ways to develop your technique and to keep violinistically buff, so to speak, so that you're always ready to go. I knew an 80-year-old violinist who was still practicing 2 hours of scales on arpeggios and double stops every day. And he was, needless to say, in great shape. Investing time on a daily basis in scales and arpeggios means that you won't have to practice them when they come up in passages in your piece. And of course, you can simply learn them in the piece, but what tends to happen is then that part sounds very practiced. So it's better to do it separately, in my opinion, if you have the time. For scales, I use the upper fingerings of Galamian, and for arpeggios, I use the flesh arpeggios. Sorry, Mr. Galamian, I just never got used to some of those arpeggios that you have in your book. There are principles about learning a scale well. One of them is, one of the most important being to establish the octave frame. What is the octave frame? You may have heard about this. It simply means the notes that you encompass when you play an octave, or on the same string would be, right, 4 notes within the hand. And the octave frame is very, very useful because a lot of the music that we play is diatonic, tonal, and our hands will easily accommodate these finger patterns in different keys. One of the things that's most important about the octave frame is that you have to be able to balance your whole hand on the 4th finger. If you are a person, as I used to be, who likes to balance on the 1st or 2nd finger, then you are always going to have sort of explosive events where you try to get, right, and you're moving around. So it turns out that this 4th finger balance is critical for playing fast and in tune. If you play perfectly in tune in medium and slow tempos, but you don't play well in tune in fast tempos, this may very well be your problem, and all you have to do is to develop this frame. One of my favorite exercises for developing the frame is actually in the Galamian scale book on page 1. He has scales in 1 position. So what you do is you simply play the 4th finger at all times. That means you start with an octave, you leave that 4th finger down, then you put this 4th finger down and leave it. Now you put this 4th finger down. Notice I'm checking with my open strings. Leave it down. And continue. So you have your 4th finger down all the time, and your hand gets used to being open like that. So that's my favorite exercise for that. When you're moving your fingers, you want, especially for fast playing, you want to avoid big motions like this with your wrist. Why? Because if I move my wrist, look what happens to the spaces between my fingers. They cease to exist. I can't feel them. So I want to keep my wrists relaxed, not stiff, but in what I call neutral. And then the fingers do the adjustments for the half steps, whole steps, whatever it is that I have to play. There's a good exercise for this. If you put your hand in 5th or 6th position, and then you do repeat the top note. So do you see how this part of my hand is touching the violin? So what I am not doing is, right, I'm not using my hand to move the finger, only the finger. So this is a very useful technique to develop because I'm teaching the fingers to move and not the hand. When I'm comfortable in the high position, using the body to keep my hands still, then I move down to first position, do the same thing. If you have a mirror, you can watch your wrists. I can't quite see my wrist, but if I were looking in a mirror, I might notice if it's moving, and then I try to keep it from moving. But this leads to the ability to play very, very rapidly because the movements of the wrist lead to chaos, darkness, and poor intonation, which is even worse than chaos and darkness. Another thing to think about when you're playing scales, you're going to be going from probably the bottom string to the top. You want to keep your index finger in the right place. So when I am playing on the E string, I need to have alignment so that you could draw a line from here to my elbow. So if I'm like this, you can see that this is not a line, it's crooked. So I need to find that line. And then not only that, but each time I change a string, I have to also change the angle of my arm. When I change the angle of my arm, the index finger also changes. So matching your contact point to each string is an important part of playing scales in tune. There is a wonderful concept I call pink and white, which is about leaving the fingers on the string or in the air, always in a pattern. So sometimes, certainly I myself in the past would play. Now, what you just saw was these guys picked up. This is not pink and white. This is the opposite of pink and white. It's very disorganized. So to play pink and white, so when I put my first finger down and I press gently, it turns white. Now I put my second finger down and I press gently, he turns white. At the same time, the first finger turns pink because he doesn't have pressure on him anymore, right? So he's pink. Third finger, likewise. The end of my fingertip is white, but this finger is pink. And I don't know if you can hear what happens if I don't do this. I'm going to keep the second finger white. So it's slightly different than if I release those fingers. So now I have fourth finger white and three pinks. And by the way, this is very good if I'm going down a scale, if I want to have everybody ready. And you continue this way. So rather than have these waving around, they are lightly on the string, ready to go. And if I have to go back down, they're right there. It's so much easier than trying to find them every time from the air. So leaving your fingers on and preparing as you go down ends up being an important part of playing in tune. In scales, in order to leave the fingers down, you might notice that you're uncomfortable when you play a half step. I don't know if you could see, but I have some squeezing going on here. So what really helps me keep all the fingers on the string is to angle. You have to angle the two fingers that create the half step. So when I'm going to play a half step, what I like is to have the bottom finger on the inside left corner and then the top finger in the middle. So you could see that the face of the nail is slightly different, right? This one's facing me, this one's facing over my shoulder. And then I'm not compressing my hand. If I put it right in the same place, first of all, that's not a good half step. And second of all, my whole hand is cramping up. And that's even without success. So when I play scales, I am always thinking side, side. I'm getting him ready. So then I'm not going to have to do what I've seen many people do, right? They pick up the next finger just to get it out of the way. So I've got everybody on the string, everybody's happy, no squeezing. And also the possibility for rapid playing.